Some of the worst career decisions I've made didn't necessarily look like mistakes at the time. They looked great on paper, but they just weren't right for me. And when I look back at them now, they all have one thing in common. I was listening to the wrong thing. External validation, maybe my ego, what looked good, what I thought I should do, instead of what actually was right for me. So here are 5 career decisions I got wrong and what each of them taught me. First up, I totally misjudged the shift when moving from a huge corporate into a startup and how wrong that was for me. And not because there's anything wrong with startups, but because I realised quite quickly, I'm just not startup material. I'd come from Sky, a huge media corporation, where I was in a sales team of 20 on a floor of like 200 odd people. And then I moved into a business where there were 5 of us and I was the only salesperson. It was a completely different way of working. It was much more scrappy, far less process, much more figuring out things as you go. And what I realised is that's just not where I did my best work. In corporate life, I actually thrived in bigger businesses. I like complexity, I like big processes, unpicking problems, I like structure, and I think this is something we don't talk about enough. We talk a lot about the role we want, but not about where we do our best work, because different environments suit different people. And I've seen this play out a lot in scale-ups as well. You have a lot of people who joined right at the start who love the chaos, the building of it, the early energy. And then as the business grows and some things become more structured, you can almost see a shift. Some people absolutely want to go on that journey, they'll adapt, they evolve with it, and some people, if we're being honest, probably did their best work in that earlier stage, but they stay, and sometimes that can make things harder because the environment has moved on from what suited them best. So I guess the lesson to take away from this was it's not just about what you do, but where you do your best work. The second decision I got wrong was chasing title and salary. Now, truth be told, I was on a bit of a mission at this point because I'd come out of a role where I felt so resentful. I'd had to take on the responsibility of leading 3 teams just to be paid the same as a man managing 1. And it really didn't sit right with me. So when I looked for my next role, I was like, fuck it. This time I'm just going after the money. I wanted the 6-figure role and I got it. And yes, externally, I'm sure that looked great, but very quickly I realised it wasn't right for me. I think this is where it gets a bit more nuanced because look, money does matter. I live on my own. I've got a mortgage. I don't have anyone else covering the bill. So of course money is going to be a factor in making a career decision, but I'd let it become the factor. And in doing that, I overlooked whether the role itself actually felt aligned. And the reality is if something doesn't feel right, it doesn't really matter what you're being paid. It will catch up with you in your energy, in your motivation, in how you show up every day. So the lesson for me here was external validation, whether that's money or title, it doesn't automatically equal internal alignment. And if you optimize for one without the other, it usually doesn't last. I mean, in my case, I handed in my notice in that job after 3 months. Quick pause, if you're into honest conversations about careers, the good, the bad, and the slightly questionable decisions, then this is exactly what we do here, so please do subscribe. It makes such a difference. The third decision I got wrong was letting the brands I worked for define my identity. And I don't think I fully realised I was doing this at the time. I'd worked for some well-known businesses, places where you don't have to explain who they are, big brand names, got me invited to events, speaking on panels, and at the time I thought that was about me. A big part of it was also where I worked. The brand gave me a platform, but I will toot my own horn here a little bit and say actually what kept me getting invited back to those events was because I had something to say and my experience was valid. But when I left and moved to a company that people hadn't heard of, I really felt it. I felt like I was on the back foot, like I had to prove myself, like I wasn't as successful anymore. I'd let those names define me and how I saw myself, and I think that's when it clicked for me. I'd been tying my success to the name of the business and not to my own work, and that's quite a fragile place to build your confidence from because the minute the brand changes, how you see yourself can change with it. So I think the shift for me has been building something in my own name, where the brands I now work with support what I do, but it doesn't define who I am. The fourth decision I got wrong was not putting myself out there when I was looking for work. And this one's a bit uncomfortable to talk about because it's such a me thing to do. I am incredibly independent to the point where I've actually had coaching on it because it can tip into hyper independence. And what that looks like in practice is I find it really hard to ask for help, especially when it's like about me or for me personally. I actually had a moment with this when I was renovating my flat a few years ago. My coach had given me a piece of homework, which was simply ask someone for help before the next session. I didn't do it. I just couldn't do it. And then a few days later, after I got a little bit of a stern talking to, I had all of my flooring for my flat renovation delivered. It was curbside delivery only. I live on the 2nd floor. I found myself standing there on a busy road with about 20 packs of flooring and just feeling completely stuck that I needed to get all of this up to my 2nd floor flat. And I remember thinking, I actually need help. So I called a mate who lived about 20 minutes away and said, I'm really sorry to ask, but I could really do with your help. And he just came. He hopped on the tube, he showed up, he helped me carry it all upstairs. And it sounds like a small thing, but that was such a big moment for me because it proved two things. Firstly, people are willing to help. And secondly, it's okay to ask. And the irony is, if someone had asked me the same thing, I would have done it without hesitation. And yet, when it came to myself, I made it feel like this huge deal. And I think that showed up in my career as well, because when I left my last corporate role and was looking for something new, I was advised to put a post out on LinkedIn and share the fact that I was looking for work. And I didn't, not for about 4 months, because of my ego. I didn't want people to think, well, if she's good, why hasn't she already got something? When in reality, most people either would have seen it and just swipe past, or if they could have helped, I'm sure they would have done. So the lesson for me here is hyper-independence isn't strength, and asking for help or being visible when you need something is actually how things move forward. The fifth decision I got wrong is thinking that multitasking made me good at my job. I do think this is something we're taught. The more you can juggle, the more you can handle, the more productive you must be. And I definitely carried that through for a long time. I felt like I always had to be on, switching between things constantly. And then there was a moment where it very clearly went wrong. I was working in sales, I was sending a client a link, and at the same time, I was looking for something for a friend's hen do. Back and forth, in between the two sites, back and forth, back and forth. And instead of sending the client the page of the website I was selling advertising for and the link to that, I sent them a link to a pair of crotchless knickers. And what I will say is, I have never had a faster response from a client, but I was absolutely mortified. Now, we laughed about it, but it was a bit of a wake-up call, because I realised that multitasking isn't actually doing multiple things at once, it's switching between them. And every time you switch, your brain has to reorient itself, which slows you down and increases mistakes. So all of this, like being busy, isn't actually helping. And since then, I've completely changed how I work. I block my time, I aim to focus on one thing at a time, I turn laptop notifications off, I certainly don't spend my lunchtime on Ann Summers, and ultimately I'm far more effective when I give something proper attention instead of trying to do everything at once. So the lesson here is being busy isn't the same as being effective. And I think the thing I've realised looking back at all of these is maybe it's not that they were wrong, it's just they were. Each one gave me something, a lesson, a realisation, a clearer sense of what actually matters to me. And I think sometimes we can be quite hard on ourselves in our careers, labelling things as right or wrong, success or failure, when actually it's all just part of it. Because if I look at where I've learned the most, it hasn't been when everything's going well. It's been in the moments where something doesn't feel right and I've had to figure out why. So maybe the goal isn't to get every decision right, maybe it's just to pay attention to what each one is telling you. That's probably a much more useful skill. And maybe the real question here is, where in your career are you still listening to the wrong thing? Let me know in the comments. That's it for now. Until next time, keep careering.